Richard Yee joins me this week from Brooklyn Cider House to discuss ciders. This is BeerSmith Podcast number 335. This is BeerSmith Podcast number 335, and it's early November 2025. Richard Yee joins me this week from Brooklyn Cider House to discuss ciders. Thank you to this week's sponsors, Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. Every issue of Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine is packed with articles for homebrewers and beer lovers. They offer access to videos, brewing courses, exclusive articles, and the amazing Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. Go to beerandbrewing.com to get your subscription today. And BeerSmith Web, the online version of BeerSmith brewing software. BeerSmith Web lets you design great beer recipes from any browser, including your tablet or phone. Edit recipes on the go with the same access to the same full suite of recipe building tools as our desktop version. Try BeerSmith Web today by creating a free account at beersmithrecipes.com. And finally, a reminder to click that like and subscribe button on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, or whatever platform you are on. Clicking those buttons is a great way to support the show. And now let's jump into this week's episode. Today on the show, I welcome first-time guest Richard Yee. Richard is a second-generation cider maker working for his family business in New York. Brooklyn Cider House is the name. He specializes in making ciders with international influence from American heirloom and other rare apples, along with a variety of local fruits. Richard, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. How are you doing today?
Fantastic. A little bit sleep deprived, a little bit tired, but overall we're chugging along. I think it's the most exciting time. This is when the cider's made. This is when the apples are grown, and if we're going to make a good impact on our ciders this year, it's going to be now. So
Yeah,
I think
we were discussing this before the show, but it's interesting. Unlike beer, where you just make it all year round, pretty much whenever you want. I mean, you're really tied to the harvest, right?
absolutely. I think it's really interesting in many ways from a production standpoint. It's actually more reminiscent of that of wine in that same way, but categorically it's more seen as beer. But totally, I mean, we pick all the apples once a year, and that's what we utilize for our cider. So it's definitely a seasonal beverage, but we try our best to still have enough stock and make enough for the rest of the year.
Sure. Well, Richard, can you tell us a little bit about your business, which is Brooklyn Cider House? How did it get started, and how'd you get involved?
Totally. Wow. We started roughly 12 years ago. But I would say our roots for the reasoning behind us joining the cider industry was my dad and I were in the wine industry for a fair bit. My dad much longer than I have, for almost 30 or 40 years. And when you're in the wine industry, like many Korean American or Korean people or immigrants coming into America, my dad, my grandfather coming in, um, they didn't speak English. And so the first thing that they gravitated towards was the liquor industry because it was just very easy to do when they were in New York, and they were able to make, well, specifically in Brooklyn, and they were able to, sell things without having to, speak the language super well. My
Hmm.
dad turned that business, that little rinkety dinkety liquor store, into a really large liquor store and wine store in the city. And over time, he had the opportunity. He had one of the most incredible jobs. I mean, I would kill for this job still to this day, but he had the opportunity to go to different countries in Europe to try a plethora of different wines, and whatever wines that he fell in love with, he would bring them back to the States. In one of his trips there, this was, I would say, like 15, 16 years ago, one of his workers asked him, "Hey, we have a little bit of a open slot between wineries. Do you want to have lunch at a cidery? It's pretty local. We can go check it out." And my dad, like many Americans, um, had the perception that cider had to be super sweet, very processed, not like a very, a real beverage. And he was like, no, no, no. But he got reluctantly forced into it, and he had the opportunity to try bash style ciders there, and he fell in love. I mean, it was like love at first sight, and it really was treated with so much respect, and the hospitality and the ambiance and the pairing with food. It was everything. And I think it's similar to, when I think about it, like I loved food growing up. So much so that I had ambitions of wanting to be a chef when I was very young. And I think when you love wines enough and you talk to so many passionate winemakers, it gets to a point where you almost think like maybe I can start making some wine, or maybe I can start making something. And I think the stars aligned and he fell in love with it. And so he started making some ciders in his garage, convinced that this was going to be the next, the the next big wave of the drinking industry or the beverage industry. And so he kind of put his money where his mouth is, and he found an incredible orchard, 200-acre orchard in New Paltz in the Hudson Valley. The reason why we chose this location was because my aunt was an avid climber, and she was a partner and founder of the company as well. And they chose this beautiful location. They uprooted, like, I want to say thousands, if not tens of thousands of trees, and planted a bunch of heirloom bitter and like old school cider apple varieties from all over the world. And we are reaping the benefits now. So that's kind of how the company started. Although I will say, my dad, he started the company when he was around like 48 or something like that.
Sure.
When he kind of was ready to take that leap, he asked me to bring the whole family together. And I was a little nervous. I was like, oh, this is like a serious talk that we're having. I was worried that my mom and dad were going to get divorced. I was like, what's going on? It totally wasn't. Grateful, I'm so grateful for that. But he asked me like, hey, Richard, I'm doing this thing. I'm not 100% sure if this is like, going to make a ton of money, but I really believe in it and I really want to do it. And, my dad, he grew up with like that Korean immigrant family mentality of like, hey, the most important thing is to be a provider. You make your money and that's the most important thing, and to have a shelter and everything. And he really didn't care about like living for himself or what he believed in, because he was working in the liquor industry at the time. Granted, there were some benefits, but I think the biggest thing was like that wasn't necessarily just what he wanted to do. He wanted to make something for himself. And so he asked me this question, and I was like, yeah, Dad, I want you to do what you want to do. I believe in you. And, everyone should have a chance at life, right? Um, I didn't realize at the time that he was asking me this because he knew it was going to be a family business and that I was going to have to take it over someday. You know, those were the fine prints that I didn't read at the time, but
Yeah.
uh, I'm so grateful for it. I mean, if you're, I'm very similar. I think the greatest satisfaction that we could possibly have in this world, in my opinion, is to work hard in something and be able to share it with people that you love. It's reminiscent to me of like my grandma's cooking. Like she would spend all day cooking, and she doesn't even want to eat with us. She just wants to see me eat, and seeing me eat fills her heart. And I think that's the kind of feeling that me and my dad kind of chase after with all of our
That's
ciders.
awesome. So I wanted to mention you're not located in Brooklyn, even though it's Brooklyn Cider House. You're located up
Yeah.
up the Hudson River a little ways. Can you tell folks where you're located?
So we're located in New Paltz. This is a question I get all the time, all the time. So we started the brand in the city. My dad immigrated to Brooklyn and had a store there, and it was a part. He is a New Yorker through and through. And when we purchased the orchard alongside it, we also wanted to purchase a cidery or a building where we were going to turn it into a cidery. But the owner didn't want to sell it, so we rented it for an exorbitant amount of money, an exorbitant amount of money. But we decided to do it. We didn't really make a ton of money at the restaurant, even though we were, doing a lot of business, just because the rent was so insane. But during COVID, it kind of sealed the deal for us. We asked our landlord to kind of give us a little bit of a break. We weren't able to be open at the time. And they were like, they were being very, not very flexible with us. So we decided to move everything up to our orchard, which is great. I mean, it's really a bittersweet thing for me. Like seeing that place still being up is great. And, having our artwork And we paid, it's not even just about the money, but the amount of effort that we put to turn that meatpacking warehouse into a beautiful space.
Hmm.
Seeing it being utilized for something else is great, but it's such a bittersweet thing because every time I drive down Flushing Ave in Bushwick, it definitely reminds me of the time that we had, the amazing times that we had there. But now we're located on our production and tasting room and UPIC and the whole operation and the cidery is all together on the orchard, which from a logistics standpoint, I am so happy for. I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
between shipping at 3 o'clock I mean, imagine having to like, ship containers of juice or whatever down to Brooklyn, and you can only do it at like 4 o'clock in the morning because that's the only time that you could take up an entire street lane and pump for hours. You know what I mean? So,
sure.
but now we're so grateful to have the space here, and we've made it our own. So I'm grateful for that.
Awesome. Well, today you wanted to cover a whole bunch of cider topics. We'll see how many we get through. I do
Yeah.
find the history of cider quite interesting. A lot of people don't realize that almost every table in the United States had cider on it in the 18th and 19th century. And it only fell off at the end of that for a variety of reasons. Can you talk to us a little bit about the history of cider in America and why it kind of fell out of favor?
Totally. I mean, I think the most important thing is apples 400 or 500 years ago in America, or in the 1600s and 1700s, were not the apples that we're eating now. Let's just get that straight, right?
Sure.
They were wild apples, right? But they were so bountiful. I mean, what's really great about especially the East Coast, I mean, New York being called the Big Apple and everything, it's apples are so they're not very fickle. They're not like certain grape varieties or whatever. They grow really, really well naturally on their own. I know so many people who own homes here that have owned homes here for multi generations, and they had an old apple tree there that just had like a bunch of crab apples. Those were the apples that they were utilizing for cider production hundreds of years ago. And the reason why was, quite frankly, they weren't the most popular eating fruit. They were really tart. They weren't the
Sure.
most juicy. They didn't have the level of sugar that our, current apples do, right? And also, if you're talking about back then, they didn't. The drinking water wasn't really the best, right? And so what they would do is they would take all these sour apples that they forage from like all sorts, from their neighbors' yards or their own yards or from just a random field, and they would turn it into cider or production, or like some farmers would just grow these. And the reason why that all these apples weren't the tendency of now these monocultures of like even in the apple industry, if I were to ask you to name like 15 apple varieties, you might struggle after 7 or 8.
Sure.
And the reason why is that supermarkets and the commercial growth has basically funneled their production into these like really hyper focused lanes of like Honey Crisps and Snapdragons and whatever, right? And they're able to do it because they have the know-how now. So basically back in the apples are really interesting. If you take the seed of any apple and plant it in the ground, you will always get a completely different apple.
Hmm.
You will never get the same apple variety. It's basically a form of genetic protection for themselves. And so back then, when everyone was planting things by seed, they didn't know how to, like, even if they had once in a while a really sweet variety, they didn't know how to cultivate it without turning it into something else, right? And so what ended up happening was they turned everything into cider because of that. But during Prohibition, and you are absolutely straight, right on the nail. You hit it right on the nail there. That um, cider was the most popular beverage, a few hundred years ago. But what really happened was when Prohibition came around,
Sure.
um, there wasn't really a need for these cider apple varieties anymore. They were too tart. They weren't really popular eating, and that cold they basically cut down a bunch of these cider apple varieties. And that's when kind of the technology and understanding of knowing how to graft came to be. And so that's when they started taking these sweeter varieties and taking like a branch of it and basically grafting it into an existing rootstock to basically ensure that they were able to create the same um, apple varieties and clone them. And so
Hmm.
that's when apples moved away from being a primarily fermented beverage to just eating apples, that
Sure.
you're more familiar with today.
Yeah.
But
And
we're trying to bring
unfortunately,
that.
I guess after Prohibition, it never really took off again, right? I mean, not till very
Yeah, well, I
recently.
think what happened was all these people had spent a lot of time growing these like sweeter apple varieties during Prohibition that, they weren't like, hey, I just spent, thousands of dollars or maybe tens of thousands of dollars on this rework, and tens of thousands of dollars probably back then was, millions
Yeah.
of dollars now to they weren't really fond of the idea of bringing them back, you know.
Yeah.
And I think at the time they realized that beer was so easy. Well, not easy, but you could make it year round, right? Like it wasn't seasonal. And I think that's when beer kind of took a stronger position
Hmm.
in the American beverage scene.
Can you give us an overview of the major types of cider? I know there's a lot of diversity now in the styles of cider that you can make.
Totally. Wow. Oof.
I know you probably can't cover all of them, but maybe just cover the major ones.
Yeah, I mean, I think a huge thing is I just want to say there are so many. And, for me, a big thing is like there, I don't know, how many people do you know that say, I'm not a cider drinker, right? But that's like saying I don't like beer or I don't like wine or I don't like Asian food. That's the same thing for me, right? Because it's like just because you don't like a specific style doesn't mean that you've had all the different styles that that for me, it's just a little bit preemptive, you know. Uh, for me, a huge thing, we talked about the story about us starting. Obviously, the Bass style cider is a huge part of our DNA. Bass style ciders are like one of the most archaic forms of cider. It's probably the kind of cider that honestly Americans were drinking too. It's a
So,
kind of
so
cider.
tell us what that is, because a lot of people
Yeah,
may not be familiar with that term.
totally. Bass style ciders are similar to almost like the sour beers of in regards to beer, in the sense that they allow um acetobacter or certain strains of bacteria to convert some of the alcohol and acids into vinegar, right?
Hmm.
And I don't want to sugarcoat it. Oftentimes, our sales team are like, oh, vinegar doesn't sound hot, but it's just a little bit, and it brings so much liveliness. It brings probiotics into the beverage. I mean, it gives it such a beautiful acid backbone that you can drink it with any food, and it's just super refreshing.
And
Um,
I think it's important to mention that you're using a lot of heirloom apples, which are more tannic and sour. I guess not sour, but tannic, right?
yeah, I mean, there are even different types of apples too, like bitter sharp, bitter sweets, and heirlooms. But yes, generally speaking, they tend to have a little bit less sugar and a little bit more acid to
More
them.
structure, yeah.
Yeah, totally. And I would say the other styles of cider, you can't forget about like, Kiev cider, from France. Kieving is like a super cool technique. Before they had filtration, they realized that they could basically float like through. It's almost a lost art in many ways, but um, before they had filtration and before they had a way to completely separate the yeast through like filter pads or cross flows or any other pieces of equipment, they would basically float out utilizing the pectin to basically separate, almost like create like a gel that basically clarified the
Hmm.
cider
Oh
naturally,
wow.
and it was able to maintain some sweetness naturally, which is super cool. Obviously, English cider is really cool as well. But I think what's really great about cider is that unlike the wine industry, there aren't so many structured, like, in Napa you have to make Cabernet and Chardonnay. In Sonoma you make Pinot, or Burgundy, you make Pinot. There aren't so many strict guidelines. What's really cool about the cider industry now is that although a predominant style of cider in America is very similar, very, sweet, a little tart, carbonated, um, not utilizing too many bitter apples or anything. But we're not fixed to those styles. A lot of the styles that we're making personally at Brooklyn Cider House um, take inspiration from all these different regions and different apples to create. So there are so many different styles, even ones that I haven't even named that contribute to the overall history and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think of some of the basic ones. You got basically, if you just ferment apples, you get a very dry cider, and then there's various methods you can use to sweeten it again. Um, and of course, there's ciders that use fruit, mixed with fruit, that make all kinds of amazing flavors. And
Totally.
I've even tried hop ciders and, some of the other more exotic flavors. Kind of interesting.
Absolutely. Or even like for us, we're doing pet nat cider. So we ferment it out. And then once it gets to a certain Brix level or a density, we'll bottle it. And you got to be careful with that because, it could it could pop or explode. But,
Obviously.
we obviously take inspiration from the wine industry and the cider industry and kind of like we utilize different fermentation techniques. I honestly, I feel less of like I'm obviously a cider maker, but I view myself as a fermenter. Me and my dad are first and second generation cider makers, but I'm Korean. Like Korean people have been fermenting things for generate. My family's been fermenting things for generations. So I view myself truly as a fermenter rather than a cider maker in some ways.
Awesome. Well, in addition to the basic work, and I know you mentioned this earlier, you've done a lot of work with wild, sour, barrel aged ciders. Can you talk a little bit about that and how close these techniques kind of mirror the beer industry, where we make sour beers, barrel aged beers, and so on?
Totally. I think a lot of it has to do with like certain levels of a lot of it has to do with chemistry, right? Like sour beers and stuff like that, they require certain levels of oxygen because the specific microbe that ferments and turns things into acetic acid, generally they're aerobic bacteria. So utilizing barrels are super great for that because barrels are inherently porous. Like you don't think that, but there's actually a fair bit of gas transfer that happens
So I
that
assume
allows.
that's acetobacter, right? Or is it?
Yeah, correct, correct,
Yeah.
correct.
Although
Um,
a lot of beers they use lactobacillus and other things that don't necessarily require a lot of oxygen. But go ahead.
yeah, yes, but well, it depends on which
Which bug?
what
Yeah.
kind of ferment you're trying to go for, right? But for me, the biggest thing is just always balance, right? How do we balance the cider? How do we add more complexity while still maintaining certain levels of drinkability? A lot of ciders tend to be a little bit sweeter. For me, if we do make a sweet cider, we try to balance it out either through the addition of a little bit more tannins and darker profiles and a little bit more bitter apples, or leaning super into the acidic fresh style. But our inspiration is not limited just to cider. It's not just limited to Bass style ciders. It's not just limited to beer. It's it's everything, right? So for me, I do feel as though in some ways we're kind of a little bit of like a mad scientist. We're seeing some of the traditional things, but applying it a little bit differently. Barrel aging is obviously super cool for us. We use a lot of bitter and tannic apples. So being able to polymerize some of the tannins and create a little bit more of a structured cider while like not ripping your mouth out, with all the tannins is super helpful. But yeah, I mean, whether it's different fermentation vessels or doing wild ferments, um, it's really for me it's dependent on what kind of cider we're trying to make, you
Hmm.
know and I think a lot of it has to do with the apple blends and how the season is looking from an agricultural standpoint. But I don't want to take no credit, or I don't want to make it so that my all my team who's putting a ton of effort into making these ciders, it's we put a lot of effort to try to differentiate our ciders even in the cellars as well.
Sure. Well, I think the point you made a minute ago is kind of important. One of the ones I learned when I started mead making, but sweetness and structure have to be balanced. So like sweetness has to be offset by some acidity or tannins in order to get balance in the beverage. And it sounds like that's the case with cider as well.
Oh, absolutely. I
I mean,
think
I
the
know it's the
biggest,
case with beer. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, the biggest complaint, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, Brad. I mean, the biggest complaint that I hear about people not liking cider is that it's too sweet, right?
Yeah, and that's a real problem. I worked with meads, for example. One of the first things I did was make a big sweet mead, and it was
Yeah.
completely undrinkable because it
Yeah.
was way too sweet. You know.
And I think for me, the biggest thing is that it's the balance comes from like when you eat an apple, Brad, when you eat an
Yeah.
apple, have you ever felt like the apple's too sweet?
No, not
No,
usually.
no, almost never, almost never. So how is it possible that when you turn it into juice and you ferment it, it's too sweet, right? Like
Yeah.
it often has to do with like, I mean, in the industry, I don't want to talk badly. I won't name anybody, but like generally speaking, a lot of people are sweetening their ciders either with sugar or with, you know, apple juice or concentrate or whatever, right?
Well, I mean, if you like, I think we discussed this earlier, but if you just take apple juice and ferment it out, it's very, very dry, right?
It's almost impossible for your cider to really be too sweet.
Yeah.
If you just take the juice.
Right.
Really, if you're fermenting, because apple juice is sweet. Like, I don't get me wrong, apple juice is sweet, right? But if you
Yeah.
ferment it to like 5%, there is no way that you're gonna ever say, wow, like, and even if you stop the ferment, that you're gonna
Well, all
ever
the
say,
sugar's gone effectively, right?
most of it is gone.
Yeah.
Most of it is gone.
Yeah.
So oftentimes I find that, it's just because like, the people are either adding sugar or adding different stuff to it. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
for us, we try to keep it natural. So our sweeter ciders, our one of our sweetest ciders and most popular one is called Kinda Dry,
Hmm.
right? And that just shows our position in regards to it is that our sweetest cider is a semi-dry cider,
Sure.
right? That has less alcohol in it than the driest cider. And that makes sense from a chemistry standpoint, right?
Sure.
When you see a cider that has 7%, 10% alcohol and it's sweet, it usually means there's some work being done at the back end,
Yeah,
right?
they back sweetened it, obviously.
They're back
Right.
sweetening it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So and realistically for me, like I find that like, at least my positioning behind it is like I try to make our ciders as naturally to like uh to how it's kind of made back in the day. Obviously we utilize different technology like a centrifuge, filtration, whatever, canning, kegging, whatever, but that's kind of my mentality behind it. But even beyond that, it's also, a large majority of our ciders, if not all of our ciders, are not heat pasteurized. So when you heat pasteurize something, it kind of makes it taste more cooked, and it definitely makes it taste sweeter, you
Hmm.
know.
Interesting. Well, can you give us a brief overview of how somebody can make some cider at home? Just starting with apple juice or something they might have around the house.
Yes. Cider, people were making cider at home. I don't even know like with like I haven't read a book that says that for sure, but I would be willing to bet money that back in the day people were pressing cider and making cider at their home. But all you got to do is, I mean, there's two ways to do it. You can either press it yourself or you can get it pressed somewhere else. If you have a local cidery near you and you kind of create a relationship there, you can definitely get something pressed there. But if it's too small of a volume, they might not be worth their while. So if you want to press it yourself, you can buy a little basket press on Amazon.
Hmm.
You have to chop up the apples pretty fine to actually squeeze it. So
Okay.
unlike grapes that press on their own, or you don't have to really macerate them too much. You can just, press them straight because the skins are very supple and the cell walls are less turgid. But with apples, you actually have to grind them. I would say kind of like pico de gallo or a little bit smaller than pico de gallo
Hmm.
consistency, right? Like a little food processor
Sure.
situation. And then you can use a little basket press and crank it, and you can create some juice. I mean, it's going to be you might get a little sticky, and it might be a little bit of you might have to put some elbow grease in it, but it'll be worth it, and you get some fresh juice.
And I assume you recommend that over just buying juice out of the store. There's some problems with buying just regular fruit juice out of the store, right?
I would absolutely say there's a huge difference. If you can
Yeah.
find juice that is not heat pasteurized and UV pasteurized, then I think you can get away with it. But oftentimes I find that like if you want to make the best cider the way you want to do it, you generally speaking want to utilize a blend of apples that have a fair bit of acidity in it. So
Hmm.
you could use store-bought apples, but I would say if you go to your local orchard and pick some little bit tartar apple varieties, that's going to be really great. That's going to
So
be
the
where
kind the kind of apples you might make apple pie with, as opposed to the ones you're gonna just pick off the shelf and eat, right?
yes, I mean you could utilize the sweeter ones too. You'll just get a little bit more of a boozier ferment out of it.
So
But
what would you use? Something like a Granny Smith, or I don't
yeah,
know.
Granny Smith, Macintosh is really good. I think Macintosh does very well. Pink Ladies are excellent. Wine sap are not super popular, but you can use wine sap as well. But yeah, I would say any of those are wonderful cider making fruit.
So good
Um,
baking apples, yeah,
Good baking apples, yeah.
yeah.
And what you do is you basically press them. You get the juice. You can if you have a local like fermenting store or brewery homebrew store, you can buy carboys to put them in. I'd buy two
Well,
or
almost everybody listening to the show is a brewer of some kind. They have some kind of a fermenter, whether it be a
perfect,
bucket or some
perfect.
kind of fermenter. Some of them even have conicals. So
Perfect.
yeah.
And you can purchase pectinase. There's a enzyme that helps clarify, but if you don't even really need to do that. If you can
Hmm.
put it, the biggest thing is I would highly, highly recommend racking your juice clean before you start fermenting. So don't just chuck yeast into it. Give it a day to let it settle, preferably in a colder room, right? If you
Okay.
can fit it in your fridge, that's great. If you don't have a fridge, that's okay. You can keep it outside. If it's a cold night, that's perfect, right? You press it, you kind of let the it's just when you press it, especially even with a cheesecloth that while you're hand cranking it and stuff, you're gonna get some solids in there. It's gonna be a little bit brown
Sure.
due to oxidation, and you're gonna want to settle it, and it'll settle really. You can settle it for a day, you can settle it for 2 days, that's fine, but you just don't want to keep it warm because it'll start fermenting on its own if you keep it warm. So if you
Sure.
have a little bit of sulfur, you can add a little bit of sulfur, but if you act pretty quick and your stuff is pretty sterile and clean, you can get away with really
Let it sit
no
overnight. Yeah.
letting it sit overnight and just getting clean juice. And once you get the clean juice, you rack that into a new fermenting vessel. Make sure, I mean, similar rules apply here as making beer. Don't fill your carboy up because there's going to be a little bit of you got to leave space for the foam and the CO2 to kind of expand out. But make sure you have like what is it, a fermenting cap on it, so that way
Sure.
there's a bit of outlet gas being able to leave.
Airlock. Yeah.
Yeah, an airlock. And then once you do that, I would say you can drink it at any point, but if you want it to be a little bit sweeter, you can go about it two ways. Um, you can,
Yeah.
it
Go
depends. If you're
ahead.
making enough to just drink in the moment, I would say just, drink it within a week and keep it in the fridge, rack it clean, add a little
Sure.
sulfur, rack it clean, and you can kind of drink it and it'll just get drier as you let it sit. But if you want it to be like put into bottles and you want to package it, I would say that probably the easiest thing to do is you would have to probably heat pasteurize it to some degree, or if you have a plate
Well,
filter.
there's a homebrew method. You can add sulfites and sorbates to it to help inhibit the fermentation. Won't completely
Totally,
stop
totally.
it, but
Totally.
inhibit it.
And
That's kind of the homebrew method, but
yeah, yeah,
because
yeah,
a lot of people
exactly.
don't have access to pasteurizing equipment. But go
Exactly.
ahead.
Well, I would say a heat bath. I have a I don't know if everyone has a what is it called, a sous vide at home, but you can make a your own little sous vide bath for it,
Okay,
and kind of cook it that way. But I would say generally speaking, you're totally right. Sorbate and a little sulfur will probably do it better. Just
slow it
know that
down.
yeah, it'll slow it down. I mean, the other thing is you can do something similar and you throw it into the fridge or something like that to just kind of clear it out, or just to kind of get a little bit of the sediment out. But generally speaking, you're probably not going to get the cleanest of racks, and just hit it with a little bit of sulfur. It's okay. I would say the other method is if you want it to make it dry, this is easier. This is the easiest method because you let it sit
Yeah,
long enough and the yeast there'll be nothing to eat anymore and it'll just it'll fall out.
yeah, it'll ferment all the way out and make a
It'll
nice
ferment
dry
all the way
cider.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you should be good to go there too.
And
You
then, of
know,
course, after that, you can bottle it or carbonate it. Obviously, you got to be a little careful with the bottles if you still have some sweetness left. But
Totally. I find that the magic number for density is around like 1.004.
okay,
If you want it to go dry and to have like a good level of carbonation without it exploding on you, you can push 1.005, but that's when you kind of you can kind of get the occasional bottle that's like very excited to be open, even if it's chilled. But
sure.
yeah,
And
I'd say
unfortunately, a
around.
lot of people have keg systems too. It's a great beverage to keg, actually.
Oh,
So yeah,
fantastic beverage, the keg. I mean, we sell
yeah,
a ton of kegs, so it's yeah. I think totally those are generally going to be your options. If you want to co-ferment stuff, right, and you want to just add a little bit of other fruits, you can add it. You can either add it whole, while it's fermenting, and you kind of do a little bit of a punch down situation, or just like kind of macerate it a little bit when you put it in, or you can do the option that where you add a little bit of juice right before you bottle, and similarly you have to make sure that like this would probably be the way I would do it is just after it's done fermenting, letting it sit dry, making sure that the yeast are really dead, putting it into small things and then dosing a little bit of juice back into it,
Hmm.
is pretty easy, and you hit
So
it
that's
with a
a
little bit of
basically a
sugar
back
occasionally.
sweetening method, I think, right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think
Um,
especially at home, you're limited to what you can do, right? But I
obviously, yeah.
but when you were talking about mead, it reminded me of my time, even when I was in the wine industry as well. Like me and my friends would just like take just random stuff and just make our own little home brew situation of random stuff, whether it's like beer or mead or leftover grapes and turning it into wine. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much how I would do it.
Cool. Well, let's switch gears for a minute and talk a little bit about the industry as a whole. I think craft cider is actually one of the only alcoholic beverages that has not seen a significant decline in recent months. I saw a study just the other day that said it was kind of holding its own, whereas almost everything else seems to be trending downward at the moment. Um, what are some of the trends overall in the craft cider industry right now?
Yeah. Imperials are doing really well, so higher level of alcohol, pushing 8, 9%, 10% alcohol is doing pretty good. I would say obviously like different co-fermented stuff like, berries and strawberries and stuff like that. Um, still the palate in America is pushing more towards like that semi-sweet, semi-dry kind of area. I think generally speaking, if I can't prove it, but Angry Orchard or some of the other like more mainstream cider producers, if you compared the ciders 5 years ago to now, or even 10 years ago to now, I think generally people are drinking a little bit less sweet stuff.
Hmm.
So the total level of sugar has probably gone down. But higher end cider, at least for us, and we're a little bit of an outlier, but our higher end program, ciders that are like $25 a bottle and stuff like that,
Wow.
that we
I
treat
assume
almost
that's
like
it's like the sour barrel aged kind of
exactly,
fancy. Yeah.
exactly. That program for us has tripled in the past year.
Wow.
But back to your question about like, the trends and stuff and how cider's kind of, plateauing. I see that, and a lot of people are like, "Oh, that's good news," and I'm like, "Yeah, but the position that we're in regards to like the beverage industry is just so small, right?
Yeah.
That's like, yeah, I mean, if we were at 30% and we plateaued at 30, like that's okay. That's great, But we're at such a small percentage now that, the fact that we're plateauing is not for me like inherently a great thing.
Well, you got a ways to go because I think the total craft beer produced in the United States still has not hit 20% of the beer production. So,
Well, for me, it's not that I just think cider in relation to beer and wine, right? It's just
yeah,
such
no, I understand. Yeah,
it's just
and like we said, we used to be on every single table in the United States. So there's
exactly. And
certainly room
so,
for growth.
and for me, the big thing is that like there's just a lot of not so great beer. I mean, not a lot, but there's a
No,
fair
I mean, there's no doubt there's a lot of mediocre brewers around, I guess, if you will, and I think that's true with mead and
ci-
wine and cider as
and
well.
ciders.
I've been
Absolutely.
to wineries and had the wine, and it was awful in many cases. Yeah,
I, absolutely. But for me, I think it's like I'm surprised that kids are more gravitated towards the beer than cider. And I think the biggest thing is it's a marketing thing, quite
well,
frankly.
that's what
Like
I was going to ask. What are some of the challenges of getting people to understand and be educated about cider and the various kinds of cider you can drink?
totally. I think the big thing is that cider has always been seen as like a feminine beverage.
Okay,
Like like not always. In the resurgence of cider, it's
sure.
been seen as like a feminine beverage. I mean, even if you look at our Instagram and who's following us and stuff, large our demographic, quote unquote, or largest portion of our demographic are 25 to 40-year-old women.
Oh, well, that's
And
okay.
or yeah, that's okay too. But I think that for me, it's like not like men are a little bit like a lot of guys. When I do events and tastings and stuff, they don't view it as just a beverage. They view it as like weak beer or women beer. You know what I mean? Like a or like
I don't know. I enjoy a good cider, especially in the
oh,
summer. You know.
I'm an open-minded drinker. I drink
Yeah.
more cider than anything else now, right? But I think that it's like I think over time people are being more open to it. But I know even a few events I've done this year where like men are just like no, like it's too sweet for me. Or, that's not my thing. But I think a huge thing is just I think cider doesn't feel cool.
Hmm.
I think it sounds a little bit like a millennial problem, but it really I think that does it kind of does come down to it is that cider just doesn't feel cool. Like like the idea of like how many shows do we have we watched where like a young kid is sneaking a dad one of you like dad's beers or something, but it's never cider, right? And I think for me it's like that just I'm hoping that over time that perception just changes. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, uh, it's kind of interesting because even like the marketing and the way that the labels kind of look comparatively from beer to cider, ciders feel a little bit more like artsy and less, manly, or not that cider needs to be a man's beverage, but I'm just saying
Okay.
like it just seems a little bit less uh, it just doesn't seem I just feel like cider just has a marketing problem. I think over time as people kind of get more used to it. I mean, anybody that comes to us and we spend an afternoon and do a little bit of a tasting and they get to try some stuff, they're able to like kind of see it for a little bit of a different thing.
Well,
But I think
education certainly a big part of it. Yeah.
that's the biggest thing. That I think that's the biggest thing. And I mean, if you think about like how many bars, I mean, we work with a ton of bars in the city, and still it's like they'll dedicate 7 or 8 taps to beer and like maybe one tap to cider just as like a gluten-free option or something like that.
Yeah.
But like I think I don't want people to view cider as like a gluten-free beer or you know, like I want them to view it as its own category, if you
Sure.
will.
Sure. Well, I think you're making progress. Like I said, you're in a declining overall craft industry. Cider is actually doing pretty well at the moment.
Yeah,
Um,
we're
so
which we're excited about for
yeah,
sure.
no, it's good. Can you? I want to turn back to Brooklyn Cider for a minute here at the end. Can you highlight an interesting cider you've created at Brooklyn
Ooh,
Cider House?
oof. That's a tough one. It's like picking kids.
Yeah.
Um, Not that I have any, so I don't know. But I would say I love our wild rosé. Our wild rosé is fantastic, and I also love I love our wild rosé. And the reason why I love it is we use some of the Bass techniques of allowing it to kind of go sour, but we
Mm-hmm.
utilize red fleshed apples.
Okay.
So they're called red fields, but when you cut them open in the middle, they are actually there's a pinkish hue in them.
Oh wow.
What's what's really
So
beautiful
does that translate over into the cider itself?
Oh, it absolutely does. It
Cool.
depends on where you get the red fields from. Some have a very light pink hue, and some kind of have like a really real dark reddish color to it. But our wild rosé it's much darker than a traditional rosé, but we utilize a fair bit of predominantly those apples. And what's cool is besides the fact that it has obviously this beautiful distinctive color of it being red, but it's all naturally apples, but it has also almost like a cranberry or like sour cherry note to it.
Hmm.
We allow it to we actually blend in a little bit of our Bass style cider that's kind of chock full of those acetobacter and bacteria, and we add a little bit of that into it to kind of start the fermentation from a microbial standpoint, and then we stop it before it's done, like 95% before it's done through fusing and filtration, and it leaves us with this like really interesting modern Bass style cider. It's almost not like a
That's cool.
to call it a Bass style cider is like if you poured it for a Bass person, they would like it, but they wouldn't call it a Bass style cider. You know what I mean? Because it's not fully there yet. But I almost feel like I've created this almost like this unique blend of like more American style ciders where it's a little bit off dry, but still having the complexity and sourness and you know being able to be a really good food pairing cider as well. And then utilizing these specialty apples. I mean, I think just visually it's very eye catching as well. So I think that for me was probably one of my favorite ciders that we've made
Nice.
in the past year.
Well, Richard, can you tell us again where you're located and where can people buy your ciders?
Oh, absolutely. We are located on 155 North Ohioville Road. There's a big sign that says "Ugly apples taste better." You can't miss it, right? It's called Twin Star Orchards. So the orchard name is called Twin Star Orchards. We kept the original name because that orchard had been around when we purchased it for a few decades, and we didn't want the local people to feel like, you know, that we were going to just change everything. Even though we did change a fair bit of stuff. But and you can purchase it online on our website. The ciders you can purchase them online.
And the
Called
website is
on our website, brooklynciderhouse.com.
okay.
But I would highly recommend if you're really interested and you're local to this area or New York to come and visit, right? Because I think being here, talking to me or talking to some of our like really passionate team members will be able to kind of give you a little bit more of an insight because I think a huge thing is, consumers don't buy, a lot of consumers don't really understand the reasonality or you know, they don't really want to purchase a bottle of cider for 25 bucks or 20 bucks or whatever. But if you see the effort that we go through to make these ciders, I mean, I think, you'll see like why it's a little bit different and why it's
Well,
different from
and they're not
other.
all 25 bucks, right?
No, we have a range
You
from
have a
like
wide variety of ciders, I
wide
remember.
variety. I mean,
Yeah.
I have ciders that go to 35 even. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Yeah, and a lot of it has to do with us working with like local fruits and stuff from this area that are all handpicked and not like super large producers and like supporting our community. So I think that's been a huge thing for us. I mean, I just picked up a few thousand pounds of Asian pears from a Korean grandmother whose whose husband just passed away last year, and I've been helping her grow her Asian pears, and I purchase them off of her, even though I'm doing a lot of the work to help, pick them and stuff like that.
That's
Um,
awesome.
and we turned that into a really cool Asian pear ginger cider that we charge a fair bit for because I'm just trying to help her out, and like I'm paying larger more than I would, I'm not trying to like nickel or
Sure,
dime her,
sure.
because I'm just trying to help
Well,
her out.
I would encourage people to make the trip. I went to school along the Hudson there. It's absolutely gorgeous in the fall, so a good time to go up there and
Yeah.
see all the leaves. Richard, I wanted to get your closing thoughts now
Well, I think
as a cider maker.
first of all, I just want to say, Brad, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, my
Thank you
pleasure.
for having me. I think um, I'm excited. I'm excited to see where our company is going to be going in the future, but also how the cider industry will continue to evolve. Um, if you, I would say, if you think that you don't like cider, I would highly recommend expanding your um what you're familiar with and trying something completely different because there are so many different types of cider, and I would highly recommend if you're a listener to go out and go to your local cidery or even stop by us or do some research. And there are tons of remarkable ciders, not even just ours, remarkable ciders that are utilizing incredible like apples that are grown like in the United States. So I would highly advise for that. And yeah, I mean, keep a lookout for us. And we'd love to, especially I would love to come back and chat a little bit more. And Brad, I'm going to send you over some ciders so that you can
Oh,
try
that
them
sounds
yourself
great.
too.
Thank you. Well, Richard, I want to thank you again for coming on the show. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your very busy schedule right now to be here.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I think for me, it's like I know that education is a huge thing. So being able to be on a platform like this and talk to different people who understand, the chemistry or are interested in fermenting stuff, I think that's right up people's alleys, and I think that would be great. We do a fermentation festival every year, and so if you're around, I would highly recommend even stopping by for that because we have breweries and stuff. We're obsessed with fermenting stuff. So, we make our own
Awesome.
kimchi even on the farm, so it's like
Nice.
I love a podcast that's open, like open to having different guests and having different like brewers and producers come on. So I mean, I think we're very similar in that mindset.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly encourage folks that are into the beer brewing as well. It's very easy to make cider with the equipment you have. But Richard, thank you again for coming on the show. My guest today, Richard Yee, he joined me this week from the Brooklyn Cider House to discuss ciders. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. I had an amazing time being here.
Well, a big thank you to Richard Yee for joining me this week. Thanks also to Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. Every issue of Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine is packed with articles for homebrewers and beer lovers. They offer access to videos, brewing courses, exclusive articles, and the amazing Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. Go to beerandbrewing.com to get your subscription today. And BeerSmith Web, the online version of BeerSmith brewing software. BeerSmith Web lets you design great beer recipes from your tablet or phone. Edit recipes on the go with access to the same full suite of recipe building tools as our desktop version. Try BeerSmith Web today by creating a free account at beersmithrecipes.com. And finally, a reminder to click that like and subscribe button on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, or whatever platform you are on. Clicking those buttons is a great way to support the show. I'd like to thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great brewing week.